So we stopped in the previous video and trying to understand how this whole sequence is connected to the verse of Elisha Shemot. So really, when the Midrash talks about how Yaakov's children were so wonderful, then it says, how do we know that they had no solet, that they were all wonderful? בעניין, ממה שקראו בעניין ואלה שמות בני ישראל, ראובן, שמעון, השווה כולן הכתוב ליעקב. In other words, because it says they were all Bnei Israel, they were all the children of Israel, it's basically saying, the Midrash is interpreting this not as a chronological or genealogical statement, but about sort of being similar to Yaakov in his character, so that they all somehow were equal to Yaakov in their character, so they were all his children. This is, by the way, an idea that appears other places too, specifically about Natan, Nadav and Avihu. It says that they were killed, and I think it's in Bamidbar, and it says Lo hayu lahem banim. They did not have any children. And in the Midrash, there's a machloket: did they really not have any children, or did they have children but not children that followed in their path? So the idea that being your child, when the Torah says that somebody is someone else's child, that they don't just mean a genealogical connection, a familial connection, but also a character, educational, worldview connection, is not new. It appears other places as well. So, what do we take from all this stuff? Especially the story with Shlomo is pretty harsh, right? If you look at the story there, it doesn't say anywhere there that Shlomo did anything bad. I won't read inside. I'll simply transliterate as I go along over here. It says that Bathsheba, lay him over a pole and began whacking him. She told him, "Everybody knows that your father is a God-fearing man. Now, if you do not follow in that path, people will say that you are my child, and I caused you to go in this bad path." And not only that, but all the women of your father, once they get impregnated, they never see the king, because he has many wives, and some of those are political marriages. And I made sure to be in the courts so that you'll be able to be king. And all the other women are saying, we want our children to be the next king. And I'm saying, I wish I have a child who is wise, filled with Torah, and worthy of prophecy. And she would continue to whack him and tell him, don't drink wine, don't deviate from the path. It doesn't say he did anything wrong. It just says she was trying to keep him, on the straight and narrow, and this is the best way she knew how to do it. So, what does all this mean? I mean, sure, we understand. It's not such a strange lesson. We all know it. Definitely those who are already parents know that it's important to to keep your kids in line and show them the way that you want them to be. Teach them how to be good people. And yeah, sometimes you have to punish them. So what beyond this obvious message, what can we take from this midrash? So I'd like to go back and once again ask, why is this midrash brought here? Meaning, I understand that we have this connection that Elisha Shemot, okay, that the midrash is Doresh over here, that to say that all the children of Israel were like Yaakov. Okay, but could there be perhaps another reason that this midrash is brought here? A implicit reason, not one that the midrash is owning up to explicitly, but implicitly is hinting at and is waiting for us to discover, just by thinking sort of in broad terms. So here's what I would like to propose, and of course, everybody is welcome to disagree. Let's think for a moment. What are we about to see? We're about to see, until now, sort of a deviation from what has been until now. Until now, ever since Abraham came to pass, true, there were ups and downs. things were not always great, not always perfect. People make mistakes. But God was always there for Abraham and Yitzhak and Yaakov. And He never let them be persecuted by external forces to any great degree. And suddenly you were thrown into this new world, um, just one or two generations later, when suddenly this king gets up and he doesn't know Yosef and he enslaves the people of Israel. And they're going to suffer for, at least 210 years, depending on how you do the counting. The famous, contradictions between several of the verses, but at least 210 years of suffering at the hands of the Egyptians. And this is very troubling because, if you think about it, as far as we know, at the end of Bereshit, Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, they all were fine. They all behaved well, right? They did what God wanted them to do. They were well deserved of their the promises He gave them. Now, of course, you can come along and say, well, Abraham was told already several decades before. He was notified that his people will be in Egypt for 400 years and they'll come back. So this is all part of the plan. We shouldn't be surprised about this to happen. It's even told to us explicitly that they're going to suffer. They'll be tormented for several hundred years. So why am I even bringing this up? The answer is, even if God, in His infinite wisdom, sees fit for that to occur, and that is, of course, we are not, we can have many, many explanations as to why. Some of you may have even heard some of the ideas that I personally like in this field. But that doesn't solve the problem. It's still a question. How can God let that happen? And so I think that's also that's sort of the conflict, or sort of the tension there between the mashal and the verse. The verse is talking about a man beating up his child, but the mashal talks about a person who sees someone else striking his child, or hears that someone else striking his child. He's going to pursue that person, that violent person, to the ends of the earth. This is like saying, how can God allow the Egyptians, the other people, yes, to continue to torment His children, and for no good reason? In other words, God has some sort of a macro plan, but that doesn't solve the problem on the daily basis, or sort of on the human perspective, not the godly perspective, of why are they suffering? Why are they being tormented? Right? I mean, Yaakov didn't do anything bad in that sense. The people that went down to Egypt, sure, they sold Yosef, but they went down there because they needed to, and Yosef even tells them, this is here, it's for your own good. This is the way things need to be. So, in other words, we don't see any place where God says, this is your punishment. The people in Egypt, you deserve this. This is for something bad you did. So why is it happening? How can God let it go on? That's why the mashal is talking about someone else tormenting your child, and how can God stand beside this and let it happen? The answer is, so first of all, obviously God works through His minions. So the twist in which we now say, oh, this is not someone else doing it, this is God doing it, is an important twist. But it's sort of obvious, right? We see the Egyptians as doing God's bidding on some level. Doesn't mean they don't have to own up to it too, eventually, but they are doing God's bidding, or at least fulfilling God's plan. And then the question the Midrash is asking is, why is this happening? So why is God doing this? Did they sin? The answer is no. They didn't sin, or at least that's not the reason the Midrash is talking about here. Remember that the Midrash can take one perspective and highlight it. Doesn't mean that it doesn't have to be a complete philosophical work that analyzes the issue from all its different angles. It's just trying to sort of shed light on one important facet that it decides to take issue with on the spot. So what I think the Midrash is saying is, it's saying, why did God do this? Because it's important. Because believe it or not, through this exposure, the people of Israel, through this experience, the people of Israel are going to become better people. Now, you can come along and say, what? By tormenting them, you can become a better person? I mean, why would that kind of suffering be anything good? And I think that the answer that the Midrash is trying to give, especially through the story with Bathsheba, with Shlomo, where it doesn't say that he did anything bad. Why was she doing that to him? What was the idea? I think this is talking about something that is very ingrained in parenthood. And I'd really be happy to hear your thoughts on this. You can write them in the video comments on YouTube. But I think there's something very, very true about this, in that when we raise our children, there's some element of pretend that goes into that education. If I punish my kids for not cleaning up their toys, um, there's two reasons why I do that. Um, None of those reasons is because it's really bad not to clean up your toys. Okay? There's nothing really objectively bad about that. If they never clean up their toys, that in and of itself would not be a terrible thing. Right? It's just toys. We know this as grown-ups, that the outside world doesn't really care if their toys are messed up. There's nothing objectively wrong with that fact. However, why do we do it? First of all, we want them to learn to respect us as parents, because we think that it's important for them to have such strong figures in their lives that can guide them as to what is right and wrong in the future. So this is just a tool. We really don't care about the toys, but we want them to see us as figures of authority. The other reason, and this is the main one I want to go to, is that our house is in some sense a playground replicating or mirroring the real world. In the real world, there are consequences for things that you don't do. And if you don't do them, you will pay a price. Now, if the only time you discover that there's a price is when you get to the real world, you won't be ready for it. And then who knows what will happen. Then you'll hate me. Then you'll lash out. You'll hate me. I mean, if I'm your father, my son, you will hate me. And you'll lash out and you'll lash out. And you won't be able to know what to do. You'll be out of control. That's what happened with Esav and with Ishmael, according to the Midrash, and with two of David's children. And so the Midrash is saying that there are periods in a person's growth when you need to sort of put them under the stick, figuratively, so that they learn sort of that this is how the world works, and prepare them for when it's for real. And I think in a similar way, they're saying that this is what's happening in Egypt for the people of Israel. That through their exposure, through the torment that they go through here, they are forged as a people on some level. How does that happen? I mean, there's just tell you, and I'm not going to go into it right now. The video is about to end anyway. But I think that that's the message. It's trying to say, through this experience, together as a people, they became one people. They came into Egypt as a family, and they left it as a people. And that kind of event doesn't just happen. It takes, you have to be tried. You have to come together. There has to, and God didn't want it to happen only when it was for real. In other words, when they had to accept the Torah, when they have to go into Israel. He wanted it to happen in advance. He wanted to prepare them for it in some level. And so that's what Egypt is. That's what we say when Egypt is kul balzeh. It somehow fuses them together, makes them into a people. So, to conclude, the Midrash, which seems to be just rambling around and talking and just bringing this because of some linguistic thing of the names of the people of Israel being associated with Yaakov and saying that they're similar, I think on a deeper level is trying to prepare us for the deeper meaning or the deeper occurrences that are happening in the nation's soul during the time in Egypt. So thank you very much, and of course I'd really be happy to hear about comments, ideas, questions. Till next time.